Close your eyes for a second. You're 7 years old. It's a Saturday afternoon, and your mom just told you where you're going. And you lost your mind. Because you're going to Discovery Zone. You walk through the entrance, and it hits you all at once. The sound of kids screaming at the top of the slides. The smell of that plastic and carpet mix that somehow smelled like pure fun. The neon colors everywhere. The ball pit just sitting there waiting for you. And somewhere in the background, the DZ jingle playing just loud enough to set the whole mood. I'm going DZ at Discovery Zone, discover what I can do on my own. For millions of American kids in the 1990s, Discovery Zone wasn't just a place. It was a destination. It was what you asked for on your birthday. It was the reward after a good report card. It was the place you couldn't stop thinking about on the drive over. And then one day, it was just gone. No warning. No goodbye. Just empty buildings where the ball pits used to be. Today we're going back. Back to where it all started. How it grew into one of the biggest kids' entertainment chains in America. And the wild, complicated, almost unbelievable story of how it all fell apart. This is Discovery Zone. The beginning. The story starts in 1989 in Kansas City, Missouri. Three men, Ronald Match, Jim Jorgensen, and Dr. David Schoenstatt had an idea. And the idea was simple. Build the ultimate indoor playground for kids. Not a pizza place with some games bolted on. Not a gym class. A dedicated, purpose-built space where kids could climb, crawl, jump, slide, and just go wild. The first location opened in October of 1989, and the concept worked immediately. Kids loved it. Parents loved it. You could drop your kid into that place, and they would burn off 3 days' worth of energy in 2 hours. Within 18 months, they had 15 stores. That's fast. Really fast. And it tells you something important. This wasn't a slow burn. Discovery Zone caught on quickly because it was genuinely filling a gap that nobody else had filled. Think about what the competition was at the time. You had Chuck E. Cheese, and look, Chuck E. Cheese was great. But it was loud, it was token-based, it was focused on pizza and arcade games. Discovery Zone was something different. It was pure physical play. The whole point was the structure, the tunnels, the climbing walls, the zip lines, the ball pits that felt like they went on forever. Their mascot was a talking robot named Z-Bop. Their slogan was Funbelievable Fitness for Kids. They even positioned themselves as educational, a place where kids could develop motor skills and confidence in a safe, contained environment. And one of their earliest and most visible investors? Billie Jean King, one of the most famous tennis players in the world. That's not a nothing endorsement. That tells you people with real money and real credibility believed in this thing. By the early 1990s, Discovery Zone was growing fast. Too fast, some would later say. But in the moment, it looked like nothing could stop them. The golden era lets talk about what it actually felt like to be inside a Discovery Zone. Because if you were there, you already know, and if you weren't, you need to understand what the hype was about. A typical location was somewhere between 12,000 and 16,000 square feet. The centerpiece was what they called the Mega Zone, a multi-level play structure that felt absolutely enormous when you were 7 years old. Tubes you could crawl through, rope bridges, roller slides that gave you static electricity, ball cannons, and the ball pit at the bottom that you could sink into like quicksand. There was also a toddler zone for the little ones, a quiet zone with arts and crafts for kids who needed a break, and the DZ diner where parents could sit, grab a snack, and actually talk to each other like human beings while their children disappeared into the tubes. And the birthday parties. If you had your birthday party at Discovery Zone in the 1990s, you were the coolest kid in your class for at least a week. It was the ultimate flex. There was a dedicated party room, the whole 9 yards. Discovery Zone also made a move that nobody talks about enough. They became the first corporate sponsor of Sesame Street on PBS. First ever. Think about that. Sesame Street had been on the air since 1969 without a corporate sponsor. Discovery Zone broke that streak. That's the level of brand power they were operating at in the early 90s. By 1993, they decided it was time to take the company public. The IPO happened in June of 1993, and it was a hit. Discovery Zone raised over $55 million. Their stock rose 61% on the very first day of trading. 61% on day one. The money was flowing, the locations were packed, the brand was everywhere. Discovery Zone was at the top, and that's exactly when things started getting complicated. Blockbuster enters the picture. Here's where the story takes a turn that most people don't know about. In April of 1993, around the same time as the IPO, Blockbuster Video came knocking. Now remember, in 1993, Blockbuster was at the absolute peak of its power. They were everywhere. They were untouchable, and they were looking to expand beyond video rentals into broader family entertainment. Discovery Zone looked like the perfect fit. Blockbuster invested $10.3 million to buy a 21% stake in the company. And at first, the relationship looked promising. Blockbuster had resources, brand recognition, and distribution. Discovery Zone had the concept and the locations. On paper, it made sense. But then in 1994, things escalated dramatically. Discovery Zone made two enormous acquisitions in quick succession. First, they bought 45 leaps and bounds locations from McDonald's. Yes, McDonald's had their own version of this concept for $111 million in stock. Then they bought 57 franchise Discovery Zone locations from Blockbuster itself for another $91 million in stock. Do the math. That's over $200 million in acquisitions. In stock. That pushed their total location count to nearly 300 stores almost overnight. And then, in April of 1995, Blockbuster, which was itself now a subsidiary of Viacom, took total management control of Discovery Zone. Sumner Redstone, the media mogul who ran Viacom, had big plans. He was going to cross-market Discovery Zone with Nickelodeon, with Paramount Pictures, with MTV. The whole Viacom empire was supposed to funnel into these play centers and turn them into something even bigger. It sounded incredible. It never happened. Because here's the problem with growing from a regional concept to 300 locations practically overnight. You need every single one of those locations to perform. You need the real estate costs to be manageable. You need the staffing to be consistent. You need the maintenance on all those plastic tubes and ball pits to keep up with the wear and tear of thousands of kids every single day. Discovery Zone couldn't keep up with all of it at once. And the debt from those acquisitions was crushing them. Meanwhile, Chuck E. Cheese was watching and adapting. Section 4, The Fall. By 1996, the numbers told a brutal story. Discovery Zone filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection on March 26, 1996. In Wilmington, Delaware, their debt load at that point, $366.8 million. For a kids' playground company, that number is almost incomprehensible. But it makes sense when you trace it back $111 million for leaps and bounds, $91 million for the Blockbuster franchises, plus all the operational costs of keeping nearly 300 locations running while revenue wasn't growing fast enough to keep up. Viacom, for their part, had to write off approximately $49 million in Discovery Zone related investments. Even by Viacom standards, that stung. 106 locations closed abruptly on June 25th of that year. No advance notice. There are people who had birthday parties booked at Discovery Zone that day who showed up and found the doors locked. Just imagine being that kid. But here's the thing. Discovery Zone didn't die in 1996. Not yet. They emerged from bankruptcy in July of 1997 under new private ownership by a firm called Wellspring Associates, LLC. Wellspring put $20 million back into the company and tried to rebuild. They redesigned the locations, added laser tag, added a karaoke stage, updated the concept for the late 90s. But the magic was gone, the trust was broken, and the entertainment landscape was changing fast. Home gaming was getting better, the internet was arriving, kids had more options than ever before. On April 20th, 1999, Discovery Zone filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy again. And this time, there was no coming back. In June of 2000, a bankruptcy judge ruled that there was simply no viable path to profitability. The bankruptcy was converted to full liquidation. By the end of 2001, the last 205 remaining locations across 39 states, Canada, and Puerto Rico were all gone. Discovery Zone was dead. The legacy. So what happened to all those buildings? Some were converted into Chuck E. Cheese locations. CEC Entertainment, Chuck E. Cheese's parent company, actually purchased around 20 of the closed Discovery Zone sites and kept some of the existing play structures, which is a strange kind of irony. Your biggest competitor absorbing your bones. Others became gyms, churches, warehouses. The megazone structures were dismantled. The ball pits were emptied. The Z-Bop mascot disappeared into history. But here's what's interesting. The concept didn't die. It just scattered. The idea of the dedicated indoor play center, soft-contained play structures, birthday party packages, that whole model, it lives on today in places like Kids Empire, Urban Air, Sky Zone. They all owe something to Discovery Zone, whether they'd admit it or not. And in 2020, a company unaffiliated with the original opened a brand new location called Discovery Zone in Cincinnati, Ohio. An homage, a tribute, proof that the nostalgia for this place never really went away. Because that's the thing about Discovery Zone. It wasn't just a business. It was a feeling. It was the feeling of being a kid on a Saturday with nowhere to be except inside those tubes. It was the sound of that jingle. It was the smell of that carpet. It was your birthday cake in the party room with all your friends, and the whole afternoon stretched out ahead of you. And for a few hours, the world was just color and noise and pure joy. We didn't know it wouldn't last forever. Discovery Zone ran for about a decade. It went from 0 to 300 locations to bankruptcy twice. It was backed by Blockbuster and Viacom and Billie Jean King. It sponsored Sesame Street. And then one day, it was just gone, leaving nothing behind but memories and a generation of adults who still feel something when they hear that jingle. If you remember Discovery Zone, if you had a birthday party there, if you lost a shoe in the ball pit, if your parents had to drag you out at closing time, drop it in the comments. I want to hear about it. And if you're new here and you like stories about the places and brands that shaped our childhoods, hit subscribe. We do this every week. Thanks for watching.